Today we figure out once and for all, does Tony Hawk deserve the credit for the 900? You might be surprised by some of the things people are saying. Welcome to Rad Rat Video. Here on the channel, 3 times a week, we learn something new about skateboarding. We're talking trick tips, game reviews, trick histories, and sometimes stuff like trick controversies like this one. So the thing is, back in 2014, Vice made this documentary about Tas Pappas called This Mayhem, which was basically the story of his life. What it's actually about is how Tas and his brother Ben got caught up in drugs and how it really affected their lives and how Ben tragically died. So it's not actually about Tony Hawk and the 900, but it does come up quite a bit in the video, so it's worth taking a look at. He makes some pretty crazy claims about Tony Hawk and things that he did to him. So we'll look at that. But if you don't know who Tas and Ben Pappas are, they were popular on Vert for a while in the 90s, and they were some of the first guys really pushing flip tricks, like kickflip indies and that kind of stuff. So they were big for a while. They were starting to do pretty well in the Vert contest circuit, along with guys like Danny Way. So he makes this claim, Tas does, that Tony Hawk maneuvered events in such a way that he was the only one able to try the 900 at the best trick contest. So we're going to take a look at those claims and see what Tony Hawk has to say. So Tas says he was getting really close to landing a 900 in the years leading up to those X Games, and he was planning on doing it at the X Games the same year that Tony Hawk actually did it. And the thing is, Tony Hawk knew he was going to do it, so he kept him out of it. He studied his technique and he learned from him. Apparently Tas had a sequence published in Transworld where he gets really close to landing one. Tony Hawk must have pored over that sequence and tried to figure out how he did it. The thing is, Tas was not the first person to get close to a 900, and not the first one to attempt it either. When asked about it, Tony Hawk says that he tried a 900 for the first time in '87, and he didn't really get that close to it, decided to put it on the back burner for a while. And then next was actually Danny Way. So in Risk It in 1990, Danny Way gets really close to a 900. A lot of people actually think that he landed it, but if you look closely, it's in super slow motion and cuts really fast. So it's pretty obvious that he didn't actually roll away all the way, but he at least showed that it's possible. He put wheels down on it. A couple years after that, in '96, Tony Hawk also has a sequence of him doing a 900 landing on wheels, but he fell and he broke his rib. So that's the thing. There were a lot of people trying the trick at the time, and including Sluggo. So he was a gymnast, really good at knowing how to spin his body and that kind of thing. Tony Hawk says if he was going to take technique from anybody, it would have been Sluggo. But again, does that really even matter if one person tried to do it like somebody else? If you think about the McTwist, no one should be allowed to do it inverted like Mike McGill because he was the one who did it that way, right? No one really cares about that. So the idea that Tas owned the 900 and he owned this certain way that he did it really doesn't seem to hold up. A lot of people were trying it, not only him. Not only were a lot of people trying the 900, but there were actually 900 events based around getting somebody to land it. And I didn't know about these at the time. Of course, I wasn't skating back then, but I hadn't even heard about them until I saw Tony Hawk talk about it. And there was apparently one in the US and one in Australia. And they were actually put up by Globe, which was Tas' sponsor. So these events were basically built around giving Tas the opportunity to land a 900. So he definitely had plenty of opportunities to do so, but he just couldn't. And the thing is, it was obvious that he was close. Everyone knew about it. This wasn't some secret thing that Tony Hawk was able to steal from him. The next thing Tas claims is that he was banned from the best trick competition so that Tony Hawk could do the 900. So Tony's motivation in that would be that he knew Tas was getting close and he wanted to do it first, so he got him out of the way. But to hear Tony Hawk and some other people tell the story, Tony Hawk wasn't even planning on doing the 900 that day. So he went in there with the plan to do the Varial 720, but he landed it really quickly. There's a lot of time left on the clock. And the announcer, Dave Duncan, really egged him on and told him to try it. So Tony had broken his rib doing the 900 before, and the best trick was kind of a sideline event, wasn't that important to him. So he didn't really plan on going in there and just really going for it. But with the atmosphere and the announcer and everything going, he decided to give it a try. So, that's Tony Hawk's word. We can't really prove that one way or the other, but that's what he says about it. And if that's the case, then why was Tas not there at the best trick competition? Well, apparently he just didn't qualify. So the thing is, when Tas did best trick competitions before, he would always just go straight for the 900, meaning he didn't have a safety trick, meaning when he didn't land the 900, he didn't place. So on paper, he just didn't look like he qualified for the best trick competition. I found an interview with Don Bostic. He's the guy who did the event planning for the skateboarding events in the X Games. And he said that the way that the people were picked out was with a committee, and they were picking 5 skaters to be in that competition. And the fact is, Tas was ranked 8th that year. So the video makes a lot of claims about how he was #1 in the world, but that wasn't really the case at this point. So if you're picking 5, why would you pick number 8? At least on paper. So this is the X Games, this is ESPN. We're not talking about people who are really into skateboarding and trying to make the most, the best skateboarding event. Maybe they would have put him in there to try to get the 900. But the fact is, on paper, the way that it looked, he just wasn't up for it. And, the X Games, they did a lot of sketchy stuff at that time. I've heard a lot of stories about people who won. They got the gold in the X Games and they actually lost money through the whole thing because they had to pay for their own travel and lodging. So, the X Games, they weren't necessarily looking out for skaters. It's possible that there was some kind of sketchy marketing purpose behind some of their choices, but the fact is it wasn't Tony Hawk pulling the strings. But what about Tony Hawk's wife? Wasn't she working at ESPN at the time? No. And this is one of the most ridiculous things that's put in the documentary. So Tony Hawk's wife, Erin, she is actually in the video of him doing the 900. She comes up holding their newborn son, Spencer. So he is like 3 months old, I think. She was pregnant throughout the planning of the X Games, most likely. And the thing is, the really funny part is, that's the wrong wife. That's Tony Hawk's first wife. His second wife is the one who worked at ESPN, and she worked there in the 2000s, after this whole thing had already gone. And she was in PR anyway. So what effect could she have even had? It's ridiculous to claim that she was pulling the strings when it's not even the right person. But the most telling part about this is that this was left in the documentary. That says a lot about the ethics of making this documentary and what the documentary makers decided to put in there. So they didn't do fact checking at all, or they did and they put it in there on purpose, which is even worse. So there were a lot of people who were asked to be in the video. I think Tony Hawk himself was asked, Danny Way, there were a lot of other names. And the thing is, none of them are in it. So they all got the pitch for it and they turned it down. So that kind of makes you wonder what made them think that it felt sketchy or made them not want to do it. There were 2 people from Globe, Tas' sponsor at the time, who were supposed to be in it and they decided not to. And when they were asked why, they basically said that. They said that they were worried about these guys taking either outtakes or stuff out of context and building their own story out of what they said. So they didn't feel comfortable being on camera with these guys. And so that says a lot about the bias or potential bias of the way that the documentary was made. So did Tony Hawk steal the 900? I really had to think about it. I decided to make a list of pros and cons. No, Tony Hawk did not steal the 900. It's ridiculous to even think that. I think most of that is in Tas' head, but I'm gonna be maybe 95% on Tony Hawk's side because you just don't really know for sure. There were a lot of other stories Tas has that are outside of the documentary that are, Tony Hawk kicked him out of events and he did this and that. So you don't really know for sure, but I will say that there's a part in the documentary where Tas is at a contest that he's not participating in. He was injured, he was just there. He was really high on coke or whatever he was doing, and he did a product toss off of the ramp during a contest run. And he was having people chant his company's name. He was doing a product toss and making all the attention on himself during a contest run. And he didn't even remember it, apparently. So if you think about him getting kicked out of an event, it may have been his own fault, if it even happened. We just don't know. But also those events that he was talking about were much after the 900 anyway. So again, it's hard to know 100% for sure, but it's pretty clear that Tony Hawk didn't maneuver events to work out that way. And when Tony Hawk finally came out with his side of it, he said that the reason he waited so long to talk about it was because the documentary itself is about Ben Pappas and the way that he died, and him getting involved in heroin and doing all this kind of stuff, and that it was a really tragic story. It's about somebody's life and death, and how, you know, and Tony Hawk stepping in to clarify how a contest went 15 years ago at the time was just not that important. And Tas actually, he never took anything back, but he did say that he wished he didn't put that in there because it did draw a lot of negative attention. It took the focus away from the point of the video. So again, he didn't take it back, but he does wish that it didn't work out that way. One thing that is clear though is that Tas actually does believe this. When Bostic, I mentioned earlier, in his interview, he mentions how when Tony Hawk landed the 900, he could see Tas staring him down. And, you know, in that moment, he believed that that is something that happened to him. So it's not like he just made this up recently as a hook for his video. You know, this is an actual thing that he really believes happened. It's just that he may be one of the only ones who really does believe that. So since the video came out, Tas actually landed his own 900, which is pretty cool, just to see the relief and the joy in his face, because this thing has been hanging over him for 20 years. The weird thing is that he does it on the mega ramp, and in the documentary he specifically calls out how mega ramps are only for the privileged, and this is one of the big problems with the X games. But I mean, whatever, he did the trick. It's cool that he finally did it. If he really was so close, it's weird that it took him so long, but he did do the trick. So what do you think about all this? Is there any way that Tas is actually right? Did Tony Hawk actually secretly maneuver things and just do a really good job covering it up? I think I know your answer, but if I'm wrong, let me know below. Until next time, here are some more videos I made recently you might want to check out. And don't forget to tap my logo on screen to subscribe so that you can learn something new about skateboarding 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thanks for watching.